Let's talk about a historic groundbreaking happening here in South Florida. It's an Everglades restoration project known as Blue Shanty Flowway. When Florida officials drained thousands of acres of wetland last year, they expected to find mud, dead plants, and maybe some struggling fish. What biologists actually discovered just days later has triggered an emergency response that's still ongoing. The ground itself was moving. Beneath the surface, they found over 11,000 invasive creatures that had been silently multiplying for years, completely undetected. They found tunnel systems stretching 18 feet deep that had hollowed out the entire marsh foundation. And buried in the deepest sections, they found the dens of 20-foot predators that have already wiped out 90% of the native wildlife in some areas. Here's what makes this terrifying. None of this was supposed to be there. These wetlands are part of a multi-billion-dollar restoration project designed to save the Everglades. Instead, the drainage revealed that something has gone catastrophically wrong beneath the surface, and officials are now scrambling to figure out how bad the damage really is. This is everything they found, why it matters, and what it means for the future of Florida's most critical ecosystem, the reveal. The smell hit the survey team before they even reached the drainage zone. Dr. Maria Vasquez, a senior wetland ecologist with the South Florida Water Management District, described it as rotting vegetation mixed with something metallic like copper pipes left sitting in stagnant water. Flesh-eating bacteria. The Florida Department of Health says there's been nearly a dozen cases in Florida so far this year, but doctors warned the risk is rising along with the summer temperatures. The August sun had been baking the exposed mud at 97 degrees for 3 straight days, and the air shimmered with heat distortion. As the water dropped to just 4 inches deep, thousands of fish had been forced into shrinking pools, their gills working overtime. Their bodies packed so tightly, the surface appeared to boil with desperate movement. Field technician Marcus Webb, who has worked Everglades drainage operations for 11 years, said he had never seen anything like it. In his incident notes, he wrote, "Pulled a seine net through a pool roughly 15 feet across. Estimated 3,200 fish, mostly natives. But when we hit the bank edges, everything changed. Here's the catch. Wedged into the muddy walls of every remaining pool, the team found clusters of armored catfish, plecos, invasive bottom feeders covered in bony plates that shouldn't exist in these waters at all. Their scales scraped against each other as they shifted in the muck, creating a sound web compared to shuffling ceramic tiles. These creatures can breathe atmospheric air for up to 30 hours. While native bass and bluegill suffocated in the heat, the plecos just waited, their armored bodies glistening in the sun. But it was what Dr. Vasquez found on the second day that changed everything. She was photographing a section of collapsed bank when her boot broke through into a void. The hole was 18 inches wide and went straight down. When her team ran a camera probe into the tunnel system, they mapped over 340 linear feet of interconnected burrows in that single section alone. The soil structure had been completely hollowed out. District Engineer Carlos Menendez reviewed the footage and immediately requested an expanded survey. His assessment: "We thought we had an invasive fish problem. What we actually have is structural collapse in progress. The burrows weren't just shelter. They were destroying the root systems holding the marsh together. Native plants couldn't establish because the soil beneath them was riddled with voids." Dr. Vasquez estimated that in the worst affected sections, up to 60% of the subsurface structure had been compromised. The marsh was literally sinking in some areas, creating depressions that changed how water flowed through the entire treatment zone. And that wasn't even the worst part. When crews examined the deepest tunnels, they found something that made the catfish look like a minor inconvenience. Something much larger had been using these passages as highways. History's deepest drain. To understand why this discovery sent shockwaves through Florida's environmental agencies, you need to know what's buried beneath these wetlands. In the 1880s, a land speculator named Hamilton Diston drained the Kissimmee River Basin, moving an estimated 50 billion gallons of water to convert wetland into farmland. Then, in 1948, the federal government launched the Central and Southern Florida Project. WUYA, 800 meters of canals, 150 water control structures, 16 major pumping stations. The engineering was considered a triumph. It also destroyed 1.5 million acres of functioning Everglades within 2 decades. Half of the original system gone forever. Dr. Rebecca Thornton, a restoration historian at Florida Atlantic University, has spent 15 years studying the consequences. She put it this way: every time we drain a treatment area today, we're conducting an autopsy on a century of mistakes. The sediment holds phosphorus concentrations that would be illegal to discharge today. It holds pesticides banned in the 1970s. And now we're finding invasive populations that have been breeding in the dark for years, completely undetected. The 57,000 acres of stormwater treatment areas were supposed to be the solution. Filter the agricultural runoff. Clean the water before it reaches the protected Everglades. But what Dr. Vasquez's team discovered suggests these treatment areas have become something else entirely. Incubators for the exact species we're trying to eliminate. Predators in the parched land. 3 weeks after the initial drainage operation, a separate crew working the Picun Strand Restoration Project made a discovery that triggered a complete site lockdown. Equipment operator James Fontaine noticed his excavator bucket had punched into a hollow space 6 feet below the waterline. When he pulled the bucket back, something moved inside the hole, something big. Dr. Kristen Summers, the Python Response Coordinator for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, arrived within 4 hours. What her team extracted from that single burrow system over the next 2 days weighed a combined 847 pounds. 19 Burmese pythons, the largest measured 17 feet 4 inches, and took 3 handlers to control. Its stomach contained the partially digested remains of a white-tailed deer. And get this, the drainage revealed something far more disturbing than anyone expected. These pythons aren't just hunting in the Everglades, they're living underground. Dr. Summers described the tunnel network as engineered habitat with multiple chambers, showing signs of repeated seasonal use. Shed skins littered the passages. Bone fragments from previous meals were scattered throughout. In her preliminary report, "We are not dealing with a transient population. These animals have established permanent subsurface infrastructure across the drainage basin." When Dr. Summers reviewed thermal imaging footage from the extraction, she found heat signatures in adjacent tunnel systems the team never reached. Her conservative estimate, another 30 to 40 pythons within a 500-meter radius of that single dig site. The removal operation was called off after 48 hours due to safety concerns and limited personnel. The remaining tunnels were marked on an internal map that hasn't been made public. These pythons have already eliminated 90% of small mammal populations in surveyed regions. Marsh rabbits, raccoons, opossums, functionally gone from areas where they once thrived in the thousands. Without those prey species, the entire food chain is collapsing from the bottom up. Predators that depended on those mammals are now competing for whatever remains, and the ripple effects are spreading further every year. As the water receded further, it created what biologists call a predator pit. Dr. Frank Mazzotti, a wildlife ecologist at the University of Florida who has studied Everglades alligators for over 3 decades, arrived to document the phenomenon. In a depression roughly the size of a tennis court, his team counted 287 alligators. The water temperature hit 94 degrees. Dissolved oxygen had dropped to levels that would kill most fish within hours. And the gators kept coming, drawn by thousands of trapped prey with nowhere to escape. Dr. Mazzotti's field notes describe territorial aggression at a scale I've never observed in 31 years of research. Gators snapping, rolling, bellowing so loud the sound echoed across the flats. He said it was like standing next to a construction site. Meanwhile, woodstoes and great egrets descended from miles away, picking off fish pushed to the surface. A feeding frenzy and a massacre happening simultaneously in the same shrinking pool. The predators were finally visible, but the invisible threat underneath them was far worse: the toxic legacy of the mud. While animals made headlines internally, the chemistry of the exposed sediment is what truly alarmed the engineers. Carlos Menendez ordered comprehensive soil sampling across the drained area. The results came back within a week, and they were worse than anyone anticipated. Phosphorus concentrations in the top 6 in measured 1,540 parts per million. The target threshold for Everglades restoration is 10 parts per million. That's 134 times the acceptable limit sitting in the mud. When you drain a wetland, you expose that sediment to oxygen for the first time in years. The organic matter oxidizes, trapped nutrients release. Everything flows downstream during the next refill cycle. Dr. Thornton explained the chain reaction. That phosphorus hits the Coosahatchee River, and it's like pouring fertilizer into a bathtub. Cyanobacteria blooms within days, toxin levels exceeding safe limits by 500%. Then the fish start dying by the thousands. The 2021 Piney Point disaster proved how bad it can get. Hundreds of millions of gallons of raw sewage has been spilling into the Toac River after a pipe collapse. Now, officials tell News 4 they won't be able to stop that flow until sometime next week. That means 40 million gallons of sewage a day. Engineers released 215 million gallons of contaminated water to prevent catastrophic dam failure. The nutrient load triggered a red tide that killed an estimated 1,500 tons of marine life along Florida's Gulf Coast. Dolphins, manatees, sea turtles washed up alongside millions of dead fish. The stench carried for miles. Economic damage exceeded 100 million. Tourism collapsed for months. Dr. Vasquez's team also documented something that hasn't appeared in any public report. Massive clusters of invasive island apple snail eggs attached to dead vegetation across the treatment area. These snails grow to the size of golf balls, consume native plants faster than vegetation can regenerate, and carry rat lungworm, a parasite that can cause meningitis in humans. The survey logged over 4,700 egg clusters. Each cluster contains 200 to 600 eggs. That's potentially 2.8 million juvenile snails waiting to hatch in a single treatment area. The drainage was supposed to assess restoration progress. Instead, it revealed an ecosystem being hollowed out from below, poisoned from within, and overrun by species that shouldn't exist there at all. But buried in all that devastation, the scientists found something unexpected: the survival of the river of grass. In late 2023, Dr. Thornton's research team published findings that almost didn't make it past internal review. After analyzing data from controlled drawdowns across multiple restoration sites, they documented a 43% reduction in invasive plant coverage where the drainage protocol mimicked natural dry season patterns. Native sawgrass and spikerush began returning on their own, sprouting from seed bank banks dormant in the soil for decades. Dr. Thornton described the moment she realized what was happening. We weren't replanting anything. The seeds were already there waiting. Some had been buried since before the 1948 drainage project. 60, 70 years dormant. The marsh remembered what it was supposed to be. Even more encouraging, the return of native crayfish and grass shrimp populations and recovering zones. These tiny organisms form the base of the Everglades food web. When they thrive, effects cascade upward through the entire ecosystem. Wading birds return, alligator populations stabilize, the whole system starts functioning again. The data from these drainage operations is now being used to build predictive models of invasive species concentration. Dr. Summers' team has mapped 847 suspected python denning sites based on burrow patterns identified during low-water surveys. It's not just about counting animals anymore. It's tactical management, finding the enemy before the water rises and they disappear again. The work costs $2.44 billion over the current funding cycle. It requires coordination across 16 federal and state agencies and constant political pressure to keep funding alive. But for the first time in decades, the scientists are cautiously optimistic. The Everglades has survived a century of exploitation. It has proven repeatedly that it wants to survive. It just needs humans to stop standing in its way. Here's the reality. Every single day this gets ignored, another section of marsh collapses into those catfish burrows. Another python clutch hatches in a tunnel we haven't found yet. Another algae bloom poisons another waterway that millions of Floridians depend on for drinking water. The scientists working these drainage sites are doing everything they can, but they're fighting a war on multiple fronts with limited resources and even more limited time. The question isn't whether the Everglades can be saved. The question is whether anyone with actual power wants to save it because the data is clear. The solutions exist. What's missing is the will to act before it's too late. What do you think is really going on beneath that mud? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want the truth about what they're still finding out there, like and subscribe because this story is far from